tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I don't really know what to think of anymore. You know, it's been kind of roller coaster over the last 2 years.
The mixed reaction to dropping the vaccine mandate for travelers, why some say they're still in favor of it.
I think it's great that they're finally stepping up to the plate, but I think something should have been done long ago.
And helping to rebuild Lytton, a new plan from the feds to make the destroyed town fire resistant.
And an Indigenous-led Games will look and feel different.
An ambitious target to bring the Olympics back to British Columbia, and how local First Nations are leading the charge.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. COVID-19 vaccination mandates for plane and train travel in Canada are coming to an end, at least for now. This all has BC's tourism sector cautiously optimistic that the industry will finally bounce back. But as the CBC's Michelle Gassoub reports, there are questions about whether the move is here to stay.
By this time next week, signs like this one will be gone. Many travelers at YV are hoping the lifting of the vaccine mandate will usher in an era of travel with fewer lineups and less paperwork.
I think it's a great idea. Hopefully it speeds up the process.
And sooner or later we have to move away from this COVID stuff anyway. So it's a step in the right direction, I would say. But like masks and other restrictions, they should still be there enforced.
Perhaps the only people happier than travelers leery of airport delays are tourism operators, who for 2 years now have watched business plummet to 70% below 2019 levels.
Maybe this was slower than we would have liked, but we're here now, we're here today, and we're seeing some really positive signs, certainly for travel in the summer.
Industry representatives say this is a natural next step in reopening, after Canada ended random testing at airports last week and the U.S. dropped its testing requirement for international travelers.
It really is based on where we are right now and the situation we're in right now. And we need Canada to be at a level playing field with the rest of the world, frankly. Otherwise, we are going to continue to compromise an already very challenged industry.
The federal government said the decision is based on science and has nothing to do with the chaos and lineups at many Canadian airports. After years of precautions, there are those nervous about the thought of getting on a plane or train with people who aren't vaccinated.
I don't think it's a good idea. I think if you're going to go into an airport, you should have had the vaccine, so you're not going to spread it to everyone else.
I don't think it's a good idea because I have my papers and everything, so I don't know. I think everyone should just try and keep safe, right? And keep everyone else safe, so.
After 2 years of uncertainty, many people hoping for smoother travels while also preparing for more turbulence. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
And it's not just travelers impacted by the mandate changes today. As David Cochrane reports, vaccine requirements are also being lifted for federal public servants and federally regulated transport workers.
Employees who are on administrative leave without pay as a result of the vaccination policy will be contacted by their managers to resume regular duties with pay.
It's a shift they say they can make because cases are low, vaccination rates high, but also because the evolution of COVID meant a 2-dose mandate made little sense.
With Omicron, things changed. Vaccine efficacy waned. The longer you were from your vaccine, the less protection you had.
And so a shift in policy while the weather stays warm and transmission remains low. But a warning, it could change again by the fall.
If the situation takes a turn for the worse, we are prepared to bring back the policies necessary to protect Canadians.
It's important to note these mandates are suspended, not canceled, which means if cases rise, unvaccinated travelers could be banned again from planes and trains, and unvaccinated civil servants could be placed back on unpaid leave. David Cochrane, CBC News, Ottawa.
It's been nearly 1 year since a wildfire destroyed the town of Lytton. Not much has changed, though. Many properties still look much like they did in the days after the blaze. And as Susanna De Silva tells us, even in the face of a new injection of federal funds, some homeowners are skeptical real improvements are coming soon.
I'm a resident here, and I lost my house. It's down the end of the street.
A tour that brings back painful memories with full safety gear required, not because of construction, but a cleanup process that continues 1 year later. Many lots frozen in time, still looking as they did moments after fire ripped through here.
We'll be here for the people of Lytton to respond, to rebuild, and to recover.
A new government announcement is supposed to help change that. $77 million in federal funding, mostly toward new public buildings, and to help homeowners build fire-resilient homes and some for businesses.
We'd like to be able to snap a finger, move by tomorrow, but as you know, the challenges with the insured places of not having that cleanup also puts impediments. So there's a lot of other challenges that comes into place here.
But some of the residents eager to hear the news worry that just means more excuses and delays.
It's been a year later. It just seems like, you know, why couldn't they have come up with an announcement to help us out a long time ago?
My policy is no longer enough to rebuild, so I won't have a business, so this funding may not even affect us.
We're trying to make it fire smart as we can.
Patricia Thorpe and her husband outside of the downtown core, the rebuild has begun, thanks to the help of fundraisers and volunteers.
So it's still under construction.
But most basic needs like groceries are an hour away. His heart attack in April, another frightening reminder of what the fire took, the ambulance station and emergency medical center.
Me on the phone telling Lillooet that we were coming, and then phoning 911 and telling the ambulance that we would meet them, because an ambulance can take an hour and a half, 2 hours here. And if we'd have waited for that ambulance, he wouldn't be here.
You know, when Trish was taking me, I had 3 little heart attacks on the way up there, and I was very detached. It was like I was looking at myself, and like I told Trish, I'm not afraid of dying. It's just I didn't want to die before the place was finished.
Susanna Da Silva, CBC News, Lytton.
A state of emergency has been declared in Kelowna because of flooding over the past 24 hours. Streams are running high and spilling over their banks. As Brady Strachan is there, and he's looking at residents who are trying to limit the damage.
Young and old people in this neighborhood are working together to protect properties from the rising river. Water levels on Mission Creek rose quickly overnight, spilling into people's yards and basements.
This morning we were woken up at 5:30 by the fire department, letting us know that we're on evacuation alert because of the flooding. And so here we are. There's a lot of overland water coming from the river, crossing the road, and starting to affect the whole street now.
People who live in homes along the river are filling sandbags and building up dikes to protect their properties. Across the street, the owner of this pub is trying to keep the water from flowing in.
It's never crested the banks in the past, but it's coming up out of the manhole now because of the water level. So we got a pump in there, and it's just trying to keep up.
Officials have declared a state of emergency and opened an emergency operations center to deal with the situation. Several roads in the city are closed due to overland flooding, and crews are clearing trees and logs from bridges as the swollen river rushes past.
This rain event was not predicted. We were advised by Weather Canada we would not be seeing any significant amounts of rain. They predicted 20 centimeters. We got 20 millimeters. We got more than 65 in a very short period of time.
River levels have gone down after peaking overnight, but many here are nervously watching the weather.
Hoping there's no rain. The forecast isn't very promising right now, so if it does keep up as they're forecasting, it's going to be a concern that water's going to keep going higher.
Officials are warning people to stay away from the edges of riverbanks as creeks and rivers continue to run high and fast. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe has been following the flooding situation out there. Joe, what's the latest?
Well, Anita, the rain has ended for now, and we do have a bit of a break before the next round, but this was on the edge of the major rainmaker impacting the Kootenays through to southern Alberta. I want to show you a map. It's the latest community to be put under that local state of emergency, adding to the list that Sparwood was under earlier. Now, Elk Valley under the flood warning since yesterday. Again, all connected to this swirling low centered over Alberta, bringing that shot of precipitation. Now, the Okanagan and Kelowna was under the special weather statement last night for upwards of 40 millimeters, but as you heard, we saw more like 65 millimeters with a strong surge coming in from the northeast. And this low pressure system has been unpredictable. You can see we've got Heavy downpours still happening in through Alberta, but for southeastern BC, the worst of the rain has passed for now. I want to show you the long-range forecast when it comes to rainfall totals because the break doesn't last long, but we're not looking to see this kind of system. So through Wednesday into Thursday, watching for isolated thunderstorms. It's Thursday night into Friday. We watch for a Pacific system to come in from the west. So taking you through rainfall totals for Thursday night, those darker greens, that's the 10 to 40 millimeter range. But at this point, even that kind of amount could be the tipping point for local watersheds. So watching that closely, and I'll take you through the big picture a little later on in the show.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
The bid to bring the Olympics back to British Columbia took a big step forward today with a brand new concept to try to convince the IOC to give us the 2030 Games. Now, it's all closely tied to 4 First Nations, not only backing the bid, but leading the way. The announcement happened in Whistler today, and that's where our Justin McElroy is. Justin, take us through the goods.
Yeah, Anita, we learned a lot today. We learned where these events would take place. We learned what will take place in the process next to get these games. And we learned exactly how they would be different. The dream, a little more real now.
And an Indigenous-led Games will look and feel different.
Late last year, the Lil'wat, Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh proposed a Winter Games led by First Nations. Now an official concept has been released, with a big endorsement because it was co-created by the Canadian Olympic Committee.
Vancouver. The Games are coming back.
Building on the legacy of 2010 and moving forward with a plan that mixes the old with the new.
What a Games we had. What a Games we can have in 2030.
From a location and venue standpoint, the 2030 Games would look a lot like the 2010 Games, particularly in Whistler.
The facilities from 2010 are built. It's all here.
But there would be some key differences. Curling and Big Air would happen at Hastings Park in East Vancouver. A new Olympic Village could find a home on Indigenous-owned property in the Heather or Jericho lands. And the snowboard and mogul events that took place in Cyprus's famously artificial snow in 2010 would take place near Kamloops at Sun Peaks Mountain Resort. But it's the idea of Indigenous people leading the process for the design and feel, with the goal of centering their story should BC host.
Indigenous-led is to be able to tell our stories, welcome everybody here. Like I said, 150 years ago, our ancestors welcomed everybody here, and everybody knows what happened leading up to today. So be able to tell our stories, be front and center, and be recognized as a government on our lands.
Nobody is quite singing I Believe just yet, but maybe that's because it's supposed to sound different.
Okay, so a big day of proposals, but the question I think everyone wants to know is how likely is it that BC will actually win this bid and host the 2030 Games?
Yeah, well, first, the 4 First Host Nations would have to approve this plan over the next few months, and likely also the municipal, provincial, and federal levels of government, giving the amount of money amount. If that happens, then Vancouver would be up against likely 2 cities that have also hosted the Olympics in the past. Sapporo in 1972, Salt Lake City in 2002. They have both put forward their own bids. Now, Salt Lake City would be coming just 2 years after the Los Angeles Summer Olympics. Also, Japan has recently hosted the Summer Games as well. So people think that if Vancouver gets to this point, they're certainly on the podium. They could have a chance for the gold. That decision by the IOC wouldn't happen until next year, though.
Exciting stuff for sure. Justin McElroy reporting from Whistler tonight. Thank you, Justin.
Thanks, Anita.
Surrey City Council has given itself the option to bring back virtual meetings to avoid prickly interactions with the public that some councillors consider unsafe. The move comes in response to events last month when councillors adjourned a meeting shortly after it started because of loud critics heckling Mayor Doug McCallum from the audience. Last night, Council's majority, the Safe Surrey Coalition, a slate led by McCallum, voted for the option to host public hearings and regular council meetings electronically when needed. Staff must give at least a day's notice ahead of a regular council meeting and 21 days notice for a public hearing if moving online. And next month, Pride celebrations in the Fraser Valley are moving from Abbotsford to Mission, but the Pride flag won't be flying above City Hall. Instead, Mission City Council is asking staff to look more closely at what flags can be flown. It's the same approach as the city of Abbotsford, where the Pride flag was raised only once. And as Leanne Young reports, gay activists say it's a missed opportunity.
This what I think right here would be.
Outside City Hall, underneath the City of Mission's flag, Councillor Ken Harar hoped to see a Progress Pride flag celebrating LGBTQ+, trans and queer communities of color.
Unfortunately, it didn't pass. They want to look into it future with a policy, and I understand that, but we could have done it.
While Council was supportive of Pride, there were concerns about protocols. If they fly this flag, would they be obliged to fly others? By a vote of 6-1, the motion was sent back to city staff to be studied.
There was no decision not to do something. There was a decision to find out how to do it in a way that is going to be democratic and make sure that we don't accidentally create a policy that has folks bringing more divisive messages and trying to ask us to fly their flags.
Harar says it's a legitimate concern, but unlikely.
We could have learned a lot more by hosting a flag and in gathering the information that we learned from it and then bringing that forward to potentially a further policy.
What's happened here in Mission isn't isolated. There have been debates over what flags to raise at City Hall in other cities, like Surrey, for example.
I just think it's, either you will fly it or you won't.
Martin Rooney has been fighting for a Pride flag at Surrey City Hall since 2014. Council had similar concerns like those in Mission.
Well, I was absolutely horrified because I just couldn't understand. I mean, I equated the Pride flag to the Olympic flag, which is a true symbol of diversity. And if we had flown the Olympic flag, which we did in 2010 on the flagpole at City Hall, then what was the issue with raising the Pride flag?
Surrey has been supportive of Pride, hosting festivals and flying the flag at other city properties, much like in Mission, where Pride celebrations will take over this park July 16th. But Rooney says a Pride flag at City Hall means something.
The fact that if they flew the flag, it would give me, at 62 years of age, and some 16-year-old at their age, that we are viable and that we are valuable and that we are equal. So this whole thing that we're giving you all of this extra stuff, but we won't give you this one thing, seems to me to just be a political standpoint.
Harar says the Fraser Valley Youth Society understands the city's position, but hopes to see that Pride flag next year. Leanne Young, CBC News, Mission.
The longest transit strike in BC history is coming to an end. The union representing bus drivers in the Sea to Sky region says it has reached a deal. And as Liam Britton reports, this will end job action that's kept buses off the road since January.
After 137 days, the picket lines are coming down. That's according to Unifor, the union for bus drivers and other transit workers in Squamish, Whistler, and Pemberton, and the company they work for, PW Transit, a BC Transit contractor that operates the bus service. Unifor says its members ratified a deal that gives them a pay raise, 13.5% over 5 years, plus a signing bonus, pension enhancements, and benefits for part-time workers. The union says the agreement came out of a meeting with special mediator Vince Reddy. It said Reddy's recommendations to end the strike noted cost of living was a big issue. That led to what the union is calling a groundbreaking aspect of the deal. If the cost of living, measured by Consumer Price Index, exceeds the annual wage increase, the employer will pay workers a top-up. The union says the deal closes the wage gap with Metro Vancouver drivers, a major demand of the workers. It's not clear how soon buses will be back on the roads. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now to some unsettling news out of northern BC. This story comes with a warning. The SPCA has seized more than 250 dogs and cats from 2 properties. Many of them had already died. In what they call a distressing case of animal hoarding, the SPCA recovered 120 cats and 3 dogs. All were malnourished and filthy, left in unsafe conditions inside a trailer in Fort St. James. On a second property owned by the same people in Vanderhoof, they also found 130 cats in a freezer.
It was just absolutely horrific for my co-workers to go in there. The conditions, again, were horrific. The floors were covered in feces and urine. The ammonia level was so high, it was burning the animal protection officer's eyes. She says their goal is for the rescued animals to recover.
Golden Ears Provincial Park is closed until Thursday afternoon because of a bothersome bear. A problematic black bear has been rummaging through campsites and getting into vehicles in a hunt for food. In one instance, it even attempted to get into a trailer with people inside. BC Parks and the Conservation Service say it's a matter of public safety, so the park is closed while attempts are made to trap the animal. And an aggressive black bear has Pemberton on alert as well after a woman was bitten this morning. It happened at around 9:30 a.m. along the popular Riverside Wetlands Trail. The Conservation Office Service Predator Attack Team is investigating. The trail is closed and the public is asked to stay away from the area. The city of Abbotsford has approved a flood mitigation plan worth about $2 billion to help prevent another disaster. The plan, which will now go to the province for funding approval, includes a new pump station and new dikes along the Sumas River. All of this would impact what some farmers can actually build on their land. A Sumas Prairie resident and farmer John Youngama is with us now. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Anita.
John, what are your initial thoughts on the plan? Is it good enough?
I think I went to all the meetings. I met with the mayor. I talked with the engineers. I think this is a good plan. It's a very expensive plan. It does protect my area. There are going to be some farms that are going to have to be, from the sounds of it, bought out. So that's a worry for some farmers. I do have my own theory on this, and I think more could be done to manage the water that's coming from the Nooksack River and into Abbotsford across the U.S. border.
What more do you think could be done?
Well, I think that, with this plan, they're talking about funneling the water through and then bringing it through the Sumas Prairie. I think that water could be controlled. It could be diked right at the border and held back.
There's talk of managed gradual retreat, moving away from the high-risk areas. As a resident of Sumas Prairie, how do you think that would be received for people there, especially given how good that farmland is?
Yeah, nobody wants to leave their farms. I mean, we're talking, some farmers are like third generation or even longer, right? So, and they've seen flooding before, but nothing to this extent. There has been some floods in the 90s and in 48, but other than that, I've lived here 26 years and I've never had a problem. I've been farming for that whole time. And this is the first time we've ever had such a disaster like this.
And when that disaster happened, I know you were affected. Can you talk about how badly you were affected and where your rebuild is at?
Well, our house had 8 feet of water all around it. There was like 4.5 feet in our main floor. So we basically lost the entire house. And we had to rebuild, ripping out all the drywall right up to the ceiling, all new cabinets, and all furniture, everything was destroyed. It's 7 months later, and we had to buy a trailer to live on the property, manage, to help with the rebuild. And we are at the point now of just starting to move in.
Wow, that's a long time. John Youngama is a Sumas Prairie resident and hay farmer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anita.
Coming up, Canada's kelp forests are at risk. Meet the seaweed farmer who is trying to save them. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. An Ontario man wanted to send a mug to the Queen for the Platinum Jubilee, but he learned he wasn't able to. So instead, he raffled off his masterpiece, giving back to people in need.
So Bruce has always lived in Warkworth. He's grown up in Warkworth. If anybody needs help, Bruce is there before they even realize they need help. So he's cutting people's grass, he's shoveling people's walks.
So I have this mug there for you.
Okay.
You like that one?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So we've known Bruce since we've been here, 18 years. At some point back in 2008, he wanted to do something for somebody's wedding, and so he asked if he could paint something on a mug.
I like doing this for fun, like doing this in the summertime and winter, doing both. That's why I do it for like their wedding gifts. That's why I do it for their years for their wedding gifts. They didn't know they're doing this for them. They didn't know it yet. That's why I want to surprise them, just make them smile on their face. And that's like doing it. I like doing it. It's more fun.
And he had this idea that he wanted to send a mug to Queen Elizabeth for her Platinum Jubilee.
That mug, that's why I did that. Her birthday, that's last month ago now. Last weekend, that's why I did that one. She didn't know I was doing this for her.
After a little bit of research, we realized that we couldn't send her a mug. She doesn't accept gifts. So we decided that we would raffle off a Bruce Brown original mug and donate the money in her honor to the local food bank.
Everybody is really happy when they get a mug, and they feel honored that he did something for them. I've had people ask me if there's any way I can put in a good word for them to get a mug made, and so that's kind of fun.
I don't know, call it a Bruce mug, that's what it's called.
A Bruce mug?
Yep. Yep, that's what it's called now.
Bruce decided to hand out tickets for free, at the same time collect money for the food bank so that anybody who wanted to get a ticket was able to get a ticket. And that's kind of how Bruce works.
So what's more fun, making the mug or giving it to the person?
Give the person.
What are people's reactions to you when you give them the mug?
Well, just smile, hugs and all that stuff. Her face just went smile, saw that mug. She didn't know and she didn't get it, surprised her. Her face, big smile, just big about this.
So Bruce raised $1,182 for our local food bank.
I do it for this community. Yeah. I like doing it. For this little small town. I like doing it. I like doing it.
And here is a live look at Swan Guard Stadium in beautiful Burnaby tonight, where track and field athletes from across the world are competing in the Harry Jerome Classic. Among the field is Canadian Damian Warner, the men's Olympic champion in decathlon at last summer's Tokyo Games. That win earned him the title of the world's greatest athlete. He's set to compete in the men's long jump and 100-meter hurdles later tonight. Okay, we are launching a new series here on CBC that brings both the West Coast and the East Coast of Canada together. In this first video, we explore a forest world that lies beneath the waves and the challenges they face as the world's climate changes.
Did you know that forests don't just grow on land? Beneath each of Canada's oceans lies one of the most productive and awe-inspiring ecosystems on the planet. This magical place is the kelp forest, and it's so important to the ocean. I'm Connell Bradwell, a wildlife conservationist in British Columbia.
And I'm Erica Porter, a fisher here in Nova Scotia.
We are the hosts for Coastlines, a CBC series that brings together young Canadians who are working to save our animals, plants and habitats on all three of Canada's coasts.
And today, we're talking about kelp. Kelp forests thrive in cold, nutrient-rich waters, just like those here behind me in Nova Scotia. Now, if you're used to calling the seaweed, you're not wrong. It's one of those situations where all kelp is seaweed, but not all seaweed is kelp.
Kelp can be thought of as the trees of the ocean because of the role they play in forming complex three-dimensional habitats underwater, just like trees do here on land.
They are one of the most productive ecosystems in the world. Some species of kelp produce more biomass annually per meter squared than tropical rainforests. Like, That's so cool. The first time I heard that, I was like, dang, I am studying a really cool species.
Rebecca Evans studies kelp and marine food webs in the Arctic. Now, the Arctic isn't exactly the first place you think of when talking about an underwater forest, but the kelp she studies has been able to adapt to the harsh conditions of the Arctic.
Yeah, so I did a bit of research and I found that kelp have special strategies to be able to survive the freezing temperatures and the darkness too. They can even grow under the sea ice. Despite these crazy cool adaptations, kelp in the Arctic is still a bit of a mystery to researchers.
There isn't a lot of baseline information about coastal marine food webs. This baseline information will be able to help us understand how these Arctic ecosystems and these coastal ecosystems are going to be impacted by climate change.
These kelp are already living in an extreme environment, but now they have to deal with climate change?
What makes kelp forests even more vulnerable to climate change is that they are stationary.
So unlike most life in the ocean, kelp is stuck in place, which means it's directly impacted by everything around it, which is super important in the Arctic, where climate change is hitting harder and faster than anywhere else.
So Erica, climate change is driving the loss of kelp in the Arctic. What about on other coastlines? Are we seeing similar impacts?
So basically, yes. Climate change is impacting kelp on different coastlines. Take here in Nova Scotia, for example.
So kelp really are the foundation of a diverse and thriving ecosystem here on the East Coast.
So the bad news is kelp has been declining on the East Coast. That's in large part due to an invasive species Conrad and his team have been studying.
So this invasive species goes by the catchy name of Membranipara membranacea.
If you didn't catch that, it's Membranipara membranacea.
But it's actually more commonly known by the easier name of lacy crust bryozoan.
These lacy crusts start their lives as tiny little larvae that float through the ocean currents. They attach themselves to kelp where they grow like sheet-like colonies that cover the surface of the kelp blade.
The problem is that colonies of lacy crust on the kelp weaken the kelp tissue and leave the kelp vulnerable to being ripped apart during periods of heavy wave action.
And it's only getting worse with more frequent storms caused by climate change, which, as you can imagine, is not good for the kelp.
One of the main findings of my research was that temperature is the main driver of the abundance of this lacy crust bryozoan.
We still don't know that much about this relatively new species, which is why Conrad wanted to study it for his master's thesis.
So continued research on the lacy crust and kelp might start to unlock some answers about how we can best preserve the kelp that we have left.
Protecting kelp is really important, but it's not just good for ocean life, it's also good for us. And that's because kelp and other species of seaweed can actually help us to fight the very climate change that they're threatened by. And that's something that Majid is looking at here on the West Coast.
So the sugar kelp itself, these are super fast growing plants. They're constantly hungry. They're eating all the nutrients around they can, carbon, nitrogen. It's a natural filter for the ocean, essentially.
Yeah, so kelp filters ocean water, which help maintains healthy levels of nutrients. It also stores carbon, which is incredibly important for fighting climate change.
And this process is something that Majid knows really well, because over the last few years, he's been running his own kelp farm.
A kelp farm?
Yeah, a farm where he grows and harvests kelp under the ocean's surface.
So we're not only sequestering carbon in the sediment underneath the farm, but we're also sequestering carbon in the plant itself that we're farming, cultivating, and taking out of the ocean.
After Majid and his team harvest the kelp, it can be used for everything from agricultural feed to fertilizer, construction material, and even a food source for us humans. It turns out that kelp farming is not only not harming the ocean, it actually has a net positive for coastal health.
Whether planted by kelp farmers like Majid or growing naturally in our coastal environments, kelp clearly has a vital role to play.
Kelp just supports so many other organisms, both in the ocean and out of the ocean, and protecting them protects us.
We don't know most things about the ocean. We need to fully understand the biology and ecology of the world of seaweed. So we've got a big task ahead of us and a lot of questions to ask. If we do it right, this could be it. This could change the world.
Are you waiting for a Nexus application to be processed? Turns out you're not alone. Why, you're among hundreds of thousands in line. Next.
Finally, in this edition of Saturday Report, we're going to the movies. And the movies we're going to screen are all playing at Expo 86 in Vancouver. The films showcase some of the world's most beautiful places, many of them right here in Canada. But a word of warning. Reporter Catherine Wright advises that your TV screens at home just won't do justice to these films. They're that spectacular.
Ours is a country of astonishing beauty.
And nothing captures the beauty of Canada more vividly at this fair than the films. Many countries are using film to communicate to the world who they are, and Canadians are doing it as well, if not better, than anyone.
Next show is at 25 after 4, 360-degree Circle Vision Theater.
It looks like a good day to paint a porch. Telecom Canada's Circle Vision is one of the many showstoppers. Produced by a Canadian at Walt Disney, the film is called Portraits of Canada. It uses 9 screens in the round to take you from a Newfoundland fishing village to the Calgary Stampede, and many spots in between. It's a total film experience, as if you are standing right in the middle of the scene on the screen. Looking straight ahead, you follow a cyclist in a race in Quebec. Swing around and all the other cyclists behind you are coming at you. It took 9 cameras operating simultaneously to shoot the film. Often, the cameraman had to hide above or below the cameras to avoid being in the picture. Filming scenery in 360 degrees is not new, but this is the first time the technique has been used to shoot people and interiors. By far the film most fun to watch is at the CN Theatre. It's 3D with a bonus. The National Film Board has combined 3-dimensional with a Canadian technique called IMAX, or Image Maximum. The pictures are shot on film that is 10 times larger than 35 millimeter, projected by a gigantic projector onto a gigantic screen.
We feel that IMAX is the ultimate cinematic experience for a mass audience as far as size and clarity in motion pictures.
The audience feels as if objects are flying out at them. At one point, an egg cracks.
It felt like the egg was breaking right on top of the head of the lady in front of me. It was different, that's for sure. It was neat.
Overall, the films at this fair are dazzling, and they make a powerful statement about Canadians, that we are innovative, confident, and proud. Catherine Wright, CBC News, Vancouver.
Russia has issued an ultimatum to Ukrainian forces defending a key city in the eastern Donbass region. Surrender by morning, local time. As Margaret Evans reports, the city Severodonetsk is now effectively isolated as Russian forces slowly take territory from overextended and under-equipped Ukrainian fighters.
Comfort is elusive in Ukraine. Battlefield losses piling up, and Russia's bloody invasion as senseless as ever. Father Vasily Vankyuk preaches to an almost empty church. Most of his parishioners have fled with the rest of Kramatorsk. But he is also chaplain to fighting men and women. They worry about the loss of friends, he says, brothers in arms. Usually they try to blame themselves for not saving them. Sometimes it is the comforter himself in need of solace. I'm losing friends too, he says. The fight for the Donbass gets uglier by the day. Ukrainian troops say they're running out of ammunition, able to lob 1 round for every 10 from the Russians. Ukrainian forces are under extreme pressure in the key city of Severodonetsk. Civilians in nearby towns are making desperate bids to escape. Kyiv says it's losing at least 100 Ukrainian soldiers every day.
I think the actual figure is more.
Gennady Yershov is a reservist with Ukraine's territorial defenses. The law has recently changed here so they can be called from rear positions to the front line.
I'm ready to do that. Just a bit difficult without weapon support and something like that.
It is the cry of every soldier you meet, including this one, who nearly lost a leg fighting in the Donbass, now in a hospital far from the front. We can't reveal his identity. If Russian weapons hit 40 kilometers, then ours need to hit 60, he says. The comfort can still be found in unexpected places, sometimes in the arms of another. Here, members of Ukraine's 14th Separate Mechanized Brigade pause to celebrate a double wedding. Christina and Volodymyr met in the army just 2 months ago. War is war, says Christina, but life goes on. It is, if you like, an act of defiance. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Kramatorsk.
Are you waiting to renew or apply for a Nexus pass? If so, you're not alone. CBC News has learned the backlog for applicant interviews has now ballooned to more than 330,000 across the country. And as Farah Morale reports, to make matters worse, currently Canadians can only get interviews in the U.S.
Long lines and delays. The reality of air travel through Toronto Pearson for most these days. But if you're trying to apply for or renew a Nexus card, good luck.
I do think that there's frustration for a lot of people that have waited 2 years.
Keith Lockman has been trying to renew his card since 2020. He says he received a conditional approval but hasn't been able to book the required in-person interview.
You don't have any ability to contact anybody live to find out what's going on, and that's part of the frustration.
We're coming up on close to 10 months now. So, and nothing's happened.
And he's not alone. Mitchell Saul says he never got a reminder to renew his card. His application is still pending approval.
I've called 3 times, spoken to somebody each time, and they say that it's going to be delayed.
The CBSA confirmed to CBC News it has a backlog of 333,500 Nexus applications waiting for an interview. Canadian enrollment centres where interviews happen have been closed since the pandemic started. You can travel to an American centre, but even then, there are a few slots.
It stems from a much deeper, more complicated, challenging issue.
This cross-border lawyer believes the closures have to do with issues related to a 2019 agreement between both countries that allows U.S. pre-clearance officers who are working in Canada to be armed.
There are some complexities and challenges in that issue that rightfully so deal with some of our issues here in Canada from a sovereignty perspective, whether or not a U.S. officer, so an officer from another country, would have the ability to carry a weapon here and then use the weapon, and then what would happen.
In a statement, the CBSA didn't respond directly to that, saying Nexus is a joint program managed by both the CBSA and the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. It added both countries are in discussions about the timing of the reopening of Canadian enrollment centres. So for applicants like Lockman, the waiting game continues.
When you hear 300,000 is the backlog, you wonder how long it's going to take.
Farah Morale, CBC News, Toronto.
Health Canada wants to add warning labels to some foods that are high in sugar, salt, and saturated fats. There are some exceptions, but ground beef is not one of them. And as Aaron Collins tells us, that's one reason why cattle producers and the Alberta government are voicing their opposition to the federal agency's plan.
Customers have been lining up at this Calgary butcher shop for more than a century. And just as it always has been, ground beef and pork are big sellers. But unless that ground meat is extra lean, it could soon come with a warning label.
My initial reaction is it's ridiculous. And the reason being is, at what point in time, where does this stop?
Confusion about why ground beef and pork were targeted and concern about what else might need a label down the road.
Does that mean now we're going to have to do it on sausages, we're going to have to do it on pork, we're going to have to do it on hamburger patties, we're going to have to do it on absolutely everything? I mean, there's going to be a saturated fat in whatever you're going to eat. Like, do we have to do it on steaks too? Like, where does this go?
Steaks and other whole cuts of meat would be exempt, but sausages may need a sticker. Warning labels would also be applied to food high in sugar and salt as well as saturated fat. But ranchers and their supporters feel singled out. They want an exemption to the front of package labeling like the one given to dairy products.
Labeling ground beef, an affordable, nutritious, and versatile protein and a staple food for most Canadians is misleading and does not make sense to us.
Bad for the industry and bad for provinces like Alberta.
This restrictive labeling proposal for ground meat could have significant market consequences for Alberta producers, increasing production costs, lowering consumer purchases, and decreasing exports.
And if Canadians turn away from ground beef and pork, it could also hurt many families' bottom line.
Essentially, you're going to see a federal agency discouraging Canadians from eating what is arguably probably the cheapest and most affordable animal protein there is right now at the meat counter.
No word yet on when customers might actually see the new labels, but little concern here that a sticker will curb Canadians' taste for beef. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
Astonishing pictures showing devastation in one of the U.S.'s most treasured parks. Floodwaters rip through parts of Yellowstone. We have that coming up. And at 6:45, a live look at Crystal Cove Resort in Tofino, where the skies are a bit clearer tonight. A warming trend in the interior forecast. The same for the South Coast. We'll find out from Johanna next.
Hi world, I'm Gordy. And today, we're going to learn about nature. Like, what would be your best guess to how they get here?
I couldn't really tell you because up to now, scientists are still trying to figure out what makes them find their way home. Scientists have been experimenting and
Has there been any thought on just like a magical idea? Like, could it be magic?
No, I don't think so. No way.
But nobody knows.
Nobody knows, but yeah, I don't think so. I wouldn't.
I think it could be worth something. Perhaps maybe talk to like a psychic to see if they could talk to the birds, perhaps.
Suzanne! Yo, Suzanne!
What kind of, is this a documentary?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I eat proper food. I go to gym 2 to 3 times a week. I exercise every day in the morning. And I keep myself happy and healthy.
I keep working, I keep active, and I eat healthy, I take care of myself.
Often I have to have healthy foods, but I love my hamburgers, I love my smoked meat, and I love my desserts.
Every day is today. If you make that every day wonderful, your life is wonderful. And then you look back and you go, oh my God, 75 years?
Eat well, sleep well, and be active. There's no point in being a couch potato.
I could retire, but I like to do something. Doing that nothing, you don't feel good, myself, you know.
Keeping busy and having social life. I think it's important to keep up with what's going on.
I don't feel age. I don't consider age. It's just a number.
Well, the images are eerily similar to the BC floods in November. Flooding is causing major damage to roads in several regions in and around Yellowstone National Park in the U.S. Roads, even houses, washed away in rushing water created by a combination of heavy rain and snowmelt. Thousands of park visitors have either left or been evacuated as a precaution in case conditions get even worse. There are no injuries or deaths to report as of now. All entrances to the park are closed. Wow, meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe here now. That is just shocking to see that house just completely coming off like that.
Yeah, and Anita, all part of actually the same stream of moisture that brought the rain to the BC interior and to Alberta. They definitely got hit harder, though, south of the border. We're dealing with a lot of extreme weather south of the border. I want to show you the big picture across sort of North America tonight with our temperatures, cooler air in place with that spinning low. Calgary just at a 9, struggling once again to hit the seasonal out in Vancouver. But if it's not rainfall warnings for the U.S. West, it's heat. You can see Minneapolis tonight at a 33, that heat pushing towards the East Coast with mid to high 30s for millions across central and eastern U.S. We're seeing that heat punch up into Toronto and Ottawa, but not quite the record-breaking heat south of the border. Our own temperatures, again, just a touch below seasonal. Once again, 16 for Abbotsford, 13 for Hope. We're actually going to get a little bit cooler tomorrow as we see the risk of showers overnight tonight. This is a current look at the satellite and radar. Not much to speak of, but there is a risk as we see that approaching coastal low. So the one spinning over Alberta is going to eventually track eastward through Wednesday and Thursday. But notice we have a new spinning formation making its way across the interior. Nothing like what we saw yesterday for places like Kelowna, but this could bring another 20 to 40 millimeters, and it'll bring the showers to the south coast. So Victoria, I think for you, those showers will start tomorrow late afternoon, evening. Port Hardy will get it in the morning. But everyone else generally dry for the day. Vancouver will see those showers in the evening. 24 for Kelowna. There is a risk of a thunderstorm across the spine of BC for almost everyone. Less of a chance up towards Prince George and Fort St. John, but not out of the question. It is lovely in Prince Rupert. Once again, you've been having a great forecast, dry and seasonal. 16 tomorrow and through YVR, as I mentioned, just a touch cooler than where we were at today, but we won't have those breezy winds in the morning. Showers Wednesday evening, lingering through Thursday morning. Hoping for some blue sky breaks at the end of the day Thursday. Temperatures recovering to seasonal by the time we hit Friday. Watching a Saturday system. There's a lot of uncertainty in the forecast. I got to tell you, the models have sort of been flip-flopping for the weekend. But at this point, be prepared for showers to start and sun to end. And we do get into a little bit of a warm-up early next week. Nothing too crazy, but some summer-like days, dare I say, as we actually get closer to official summer, believe it or not.
I'll take those 21-degree temperatures.
Yeah.
Looks good to me.
Thought you would, me too.
Thanks, Jo.
You're welcome.
Well, for 50 years, Canada and Denmark have been fighting over this rock. Now, the conflict has come to an end. Find out why you'd need your passport if you were planning a visit next.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here.
The school president waited many weeks to make this announcement.
I'm so excited to let you know that we are the winning bidder on our buildings. We now own our own school building. St. Bonaventure's College is ours.
And the joy bells were ringing at the Basilica Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. This massive church that has dominated the St. John's landscape for more than 150 years, this Jesuit private school, and this skating rink have all been sold.
It's unbelievably good news.
A joint committee consisting of the Basilica Heritage Foundation, St. Bonaventure's College, Inc., and St. Bon's Forum Corporation have submitted the winning bid for the block of buildings and the 9 acres on which they're located.
The feeling that we have now is really one of relief and euphoria and, frankly, excitement for the future.
The Archdiocese of St. John's is selling off its vast holdings of properties under a court-monitored insolvency process. It's in response to a Supreme Court of Canada ruling last year that left the Archdiocese liable for abuse at the Mount Cashel Orphanage in St. John's between the 1940s and 60s. The total amount of claims is not yet determined, but early estimates say it could surpass $50 million for dozens of survivors. The deadline for bids for some 24 churches and other properties in the St. John's area closed on June 2nd. The Joint Committee wanted to get these buildings to save them, but there was interest from condo developers in Toronto.
The process over the last few months was incredibly stressful, and it was really tough. I got to be honest with you.
Hello, my name is Chloe Flusk, and I'm really happy that we have ownership of St. Bon's now, and I get to stay here to grade 12. So now we get to have ownership, and yeah, it's just happy.
Now we have this certain future. You know, we're going to be paving our new path, see what comes, but we're really excited.
Now that the school owns the building, it's really about taking care and it's about planning for the future.
While they were celebrating at St. Bon's and at the Basilica today, this is yet another reminder of a dark chapter in the history of the Roman Catholic Church in this province. I was talking to some of the lawyers today who represent the abuse survivors, and they say they're encouraged by this first sale. It's a start, they say, when it comes to compensating the survivors. Terry Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
Hi, I'm Anita Bathe, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC Vancouver is a proud returning media partner of the Talking Stick Festival, June 12th to July 3rd. Enjoy and explore Indigenous culture through art, dance, theatre, film, and more. Get tickets at fullcircle.ca and celebrate summer with Corleone at Pop Capella on June 25th. Come and enjoy high-impact harmonies and your favorite hits by pop legends. Learn more at corleone.org.
Where there was just one neighbor, now there are two. Canada has a new land border with Denmark, but it's safe to say you probably won't be crossing it anytime soon. The deal to split a remote Arctic island ends a 50-year-old feud between the two nations. And as Ashley Burke reports, officials from both countries say diplomacy led to a peaceful resolution.
A nearly 50-year conflict over this tiny island now resolved.
As peaceful as this is, and this has been, even that kind of battle needs an end.
Two friendly nations making a deal to send a message to an unfriendly one.
Clearly what we're showing today is that you don't redraw boundaries through the barrel of a gun.
It sends a message to the world, and also including President Putin, that when there are things that you're disputing over, you have to make the resolution based on international law.
Hans Island is a 1.3 square kilometer rock, barren, icy, and smack dab in the middle of the waters between Canada and Greenland. This Danish journalist, one of the few that stepped foot on it.
You feel the closeness of both nations, and then knowing that you are on top of a 50-year-old conflict of international magnitude is really odd, because there's nothing. It's worthless. There's no minerals. There is no oil in the waters next to it.
Worthless for resources, but valuable for Inuit as a vantage point for hunting since the 14th century.
This agreement shows that we can agree when we listen together.
That agreement also officially ends what's known as the Whiskey War. In the 1980s, the Canadian Armed Forces planted a flag on the island and left behind Canadian whiskey. The Danish replaced it with schnapps, and on it went. Today marks the final exchange.
Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine created the right moment for two NATO allies to signal that this is how responsible countries resolve their territorial disputes in a peaceful way.
The countries plan to split the rock almost down the middle, with Greenland's portion slightly larger, the new border following this rift in the island, repairing a long-standing rift between the two nations. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
The next CBC News Bureau, perhaps? Not sure I'll be applying for that correspondent position, but looks like a pretty cool place to visit for sure. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News. We are back tomorrow online at 6 p.m. and our television show will be delayed until after the hockey game. Good night.